Today we're chasing big power in this G20 M340i by adding a pure 800 turbo. Hey, this is Brian. Thanks for watching Kies Motorsports. If you like our videos, give us a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and check us out at kiesmotorsports.com. As many of you know, we have been building Edwin's G20 M340i, and we're just getting started. So today, we're going to show you the step-by-step process on how to install a pure 800 turbo. Now, before we get started with the actual installation, we just want to show you the actual turbo so you can understand really what goes into it. Now, something that I really like about Pure is everything is direct bolt-on. So what they do, if you're not familiar, they actually take an OEM turbo, so this is a BMW OEM turbo, and then they'll actually bore out for the compressor wheel and also the turbine. So if you take a look here, we'll show you once we have it off, the wheel in these is bigger on both sides, the cool side and then also the hot side. Now Pure has done some testing and they have broken over 500 horsepower on this turbo with pump gas, and then they took it to, it was over 600, but they had like E85 and some other things. But for basic fueling for 93, over 500 horsepower out of a car that came with about 380. So immense gains, especially with pump fuel. When you buy the turbo, you get the turbo, and then you're going to get this custom-made inlet piece, which you can see has the Pure logo on it. This is already going to be bolted up. We just took it off so that you could get a good look at this, and we could do a nice side-by-side comparison. But like I said before, the thing I love about Pure is it's direct plug and play. There's no modification. You take the old one off, you put this one back on, and you're good to go. Now you'll notice that we also have some other miscellaneous hardware. This is not included in the actual turbo kit, but it is available as an add-on if you don't already have the hardware. We always recommend replacing everything because it's so much easier to stop a leak before it ever happens than to just reuse your old gaskets and whatnot. And then, you know, if you have a leak 6 months down the line, you have to go through it all again. So just do it right the first time. It's a couple bucks to get everything else, but you know that you'll be solid. Now for this installation, we are going to be doing it on our lift. You do not need to use a lift at all. If you watched our old videos, we did an N55 xdrive turbo install on our backs, which is much more difficult than this. So this should be a cakewalk to do on your back if you have to do it on a jack stand. Just make sure that everything is properly secured so the car doesn't squish you. Now before we put the car up in the air, we're just gonna loosen the coolant and also the oil cap, just so that as we start to drain some things out, it'll just flow a little bit easier. So I'm just gonna loosen it and then just set it on top so nothing falls in. Same thing with this, we'll just loosen it, kind of set it to the side, pull off the engine cover here. If you haven't done this, there's just 4 little grommets that hold it in place. They just lift up, just like that, and just so you can see what I did, there's a location here, 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 and over here. And they go over these little plastic pegs. They just pop on, just pop off, super easy. Okay, and then what we need to do is we need to loosen the clamps for the O2 sensors because we're gonna be dropping the exhaust off. So what I like to do is just take a flathead screwdriver and you just pull this little gray piece out, and then you just push on that and then slide it off. So this one goes here, this one goes there. Now, one thing to note is they are color coordinated, so you will see that the colors will match here, just like that. Okay, once you have these unclipped, you will notice that this doesn't really go anywhere. The trick is if you take a pick tool, you want to take this little middle piece, I'll show you when it's off, but you push it over to the left and then it'll slide out. So basically I'm getting my little pick tool, I'm releasing this clip, and that's gonna prevent anything from getting broken. So then when you're ready to reinstall, you go like that, and it's nice and snug, just like it was designed. Again, on this one. And then you can just continue to just unclip these 2 lines to get it ready for when we're below the car. Then just like we did with the coolant reservoir, so you're gonna take your oil cap and just pop it, just put it to the side like that, just to make sure that all of the oil is going to flow correctly out of the car. After that, the last thing is to loosen the V-band, and if you don't feel like doing it now, you can do it later. that's not a problem. But if you look right where my finger is here, there is a 13 millimeter. So just gonna reach down there and loosen that. Now this is what holds your downpipe on, but it's not just this, so your exhaust, don't worry about your exhaust crashing off or anything like that. There's actually 2 other bolts that secure it in place. So what you wanna do is get this nice and loose, and I'll show you what you can do with it. So once you have it nice and loose, you just kinda like lift up and spread this, and then you can push it on the downpipe side. That way it's going to be pretty secure here. It's not gonna hit you in the face or anything when you go to take it off. With that all done, let's put the car in the air. Now that we have the car up in the air, we're going to remove some underbody protection so that we can properly drain out all of the fluids that are in the turbos, and it just makes it a little bit easier to be able to see what you're doing. Once we've done that, we are going to drop the exhaust. Now you may have seen our step-by-step video on how to install an AWE exhaust on an M340i. So it's basically going to be that in reverse, but instead of taking it apart piece by piece, we're going to loosen it by the downpipe and then all of these mounting locations, and we're just gonna drop the entire thing so that we can just put it up in one. Now, some guys, when they do the turbos, they will just disconnect the mid pipe from the downpipe and then just pull the downpipe out. You can do that if you really want to. For us, it just takes another 10 minutes or so to drop the rest of the exhaust, so we're just gonna get it completely out of the way. But with that, let's get a 10 mil. And we're gonna start by removing this panel right here because this is covering our stiffening plate, and then we're gonna remove this, and then we'll have a clear shot to the turbo. So let's start by removing these 10 mils. I love that BMW switched from 8 mil to 10 mil finally on these little ones. I don't know why they didn't do it years ago, but I'm just really glad that they did. So basically there's one here, there's one here, there's one here, here, and then just all around the perimeter. So let's start with the front ones here. And just be very careful as junk can fall out. It's gotten collected through your grills and whatnot. Okay, once you've done that, you just pull it down. Again, watch your eyes, slide it out, and we'll set that to the side. Now that that's out of the way, you have access to remove these front bolts on your stiffening plate. So there's 3 up in the front, then there's another 4 over here, and then there's 1 in each corner. And these are all in 18 mil. So at this time, you can remove these. Now, typically when I'm doing these, what I like to do, and you may have seen me do it a little bit over here, I like to get the ones on the outside and then come back for the middle one so it's not just awkwardly hanging. You'll have pretty much even support all around if you wait for that one. So if you do this one last, you know, it could be hanging down. So it's not something you have to do, it's something we like to do. Okay, same thing, just be careful of your eyes. Always drop it away from you. And now, look at all that access. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a high-level overview on how to drop the exhaust. Like I said before, it takes like 10 minutes, so it's completely worth it to just get it out of your way. This car does have an AWE exhaust on it with an aftermarket downpipe, so this size might be a little bit different, but the rest will be the same. So the first thing you need is a 15 mil. Like I said, it might be a little bit different depending on if it's OEM or aftermarket like this, but it's gonna be around that same size. Then you are going to need, I believe this one is a 13 mil. Yep, 13 mil, which is going to be connected to your mid pipe. So you're gonna disconnect that. And then over here you have 2, 4, 6, 8 of the E10s. This is an E-Torx. So you're gonna take those out, and then there's a 10 mil on this end and a 10 mil on this end. Then there's an exhaust hanger here, which requires the removal of a 13 millimeter nut. Over here, don't forget to disconnect your actuator for your valve. It's just one clip. And then up here, there is a 13 mil, just a nut that holds the hanger on. And then over here, there is a 13 mil. And other than that, that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna start with this. I'm gonna drop the support brace down. Looks like there's actually 4 of the 10 mils. Forgot the one. They snuck that other one in there. All right, so the next part of the process, if you look up here, there's a 13 millimeter nut here and a 13 millimeter nut somewhere over here. And then To hold this whole piece in, there's a clip. So even once you release these two nuts, don't worry, the downpipe shouldn't fall on your head because you're gonna have to push up on this little tab up here, and then you're going to be able to pop it off. So with that, let's remove these two nuts. All right, one down, one to go. So right now, as you saw before, the V-band clamp is off of the downpipe. That is off, and it didn't fall on my head, which is good. So now, I'm gonna press up on that tab, and then you just wiggle it over, like that. Okay. Be careful of your O2 sensors. Downpipe. So if you look up here, this is the little tab. So you pull this tab back and then you slide the downpipe on, or pull it back and then pull it off. All right, so up here you can see the turbo. I'm just kidding, the car's been sitting. But don't do it when the car is hot because this thing will get like 1,000 degrees. But anyway, so when we actually go to remove it, we're gonna do everything from the top, which is again, super nice. If you watched our videos with the S55 and the N55, you have to support the motor and do all of that, take off motor mounts. This, no, you don't have to do any of that. You're gonna basically be removing some oil and coolant lines, and then there are these bolts across the bottom, and there's this piece right here is actually gonna come off, and then there's also the nuts on the top. We're gonna show you all that from the top, but just wanted to give you a little sneak peek of what's to come. Okay, so while we're here, we're going to drain out the oil, and we are going to drain some of the coolant out. Some people don't like to do this, they like to just top off the oil. Whenever we do turbos, you're already here, you're already draining some of it out. Instead of just worrying about filling a little bit, why not just change it? So if you haven't changed your oil yet, this thing's really annoying. Basically what you need to do is you need to push up and twist like that, and try not to lose your fingers. It has these little weird plastic lock things. And then that, you can see where the oil drain bolt is. And then when you want to put it back, which I'm not gonna do, you just put it back and it slides into place. So again, you just kind of push up and then give it a little twist and it'll pop off. I like some things on the G20. This is not one of them. But with that removed, let's drain the oil. Okay, so with that out of the way, take a 17 mil. We're gonna crack this loose. Get our drain bucket under here. We're gonna drain out the oil. Now, once you've finished draining your oil, you're going to remove your old crush washer and install the new one. We get our oil filters from BMW directly, and they include the crush washer and the new gasket for the oil filter. And once you've done that, we're gonna tighten this back down to 25 Newton meters. Okay, good. Now, since we've been dealing with the oil, we're going to remove the oil line that sits on the bottom. So if you look straight up here, there is a T30 at the top, right there. And then there is another T30. If you look, it's right here. If you can see where I'm generally pointing to. So I'm going to disconnect this, just gonna twist it out. It's only torqued down to like 8 Newton meters, so it's super light. And then I'm going to remove this, and then I'm gonna pull that down, and I'm gonna pull this up, and we are going to get that out of the way. Now Zach's not gonna have the camera directly under it because it may drip a little bit of oil. We did drain the oil from the vehicle, but there's always a little bit left. So always have a towel ready and don't stand directly under it when you pull the line off. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go up here, sneak that on there. One. Now for this one, I found the best way to do it is to put an extension on. I have about it's kind of hard to tell, I guess about a 6-inch extension on, and I'm going in through the side. There's really not a tremendous amount of room to work once you get in here. So I'm basically just hand twisting the extension now that I have it broken loose. And then I'll pull that bolt out, and then we'll see if anything else drips out as we pull the line. All right, so here's bolt number 2. I'll show you what I was using up there. So I just have this little ratchet that I like to use, and it's about a 6-inch extension, and then my T30. And then once I get to bolts that are a little bit more crucial like these, I'll typically write, either we get a strip of painter's tape, we'll write on our table, or we'll just write right on here, and that'll tell me what those were from. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this side right there off of right over here, and then we're gonna pull it straight down. So my hand's probably gonna be completely in your way, but just so you know, that is what's gonna be happening. Okay, so I pulled it off the side, and then you just kind of twist it a little bit. And then pull it straight down. And because we drained our oil and all, look at that, not a drop. Now what I like to do is I like to notate which was in the turbo. So I'm going to go over there, and again, I'm just gonna lay it down, and then I'm just going to label it so that I know which side was in the turbo. Now at this point, that's pretty much all that we can do under the car. We do still have to pull the coolant line and do some other things, but we're gonna have to go up and then come back down, or just put a bucket under. I haven't decided what we're gonna do yet. But for now, we can just move this out of the way, and we're gonna put the car back down. Okay, now that we're back up on the top, we're going to remove our intake. So this is an aftermarket one from MST, but it's going to be pretty much the same process. So push up on this clip, and then you press on it, and that is going to release that clip. And then for this intake, I just have a hose clamp down here that I need to release. And then once you've done that on here, we'll start to work our way up. Okay, now that we've done that, I'm going to remove the top of the heat shield. If you have an aftermarket intake, yours might be a little bit different. If you have OEM, it's just gonna pull straight up at this point. So just a little extra step. And then at this point, our heat shield is loose and our inlet is loose. So we're just gonna slide this entire thing off like that. Now that you've done that, we're going to continue removing the rest of the inlet. There's a little clip in here, which is really hard for you to see. Let's see, here's one up here. So basically it's gonna be the same principle. It has this little clip on this side, a little clip on the bottom. You just press on it's gonna be your left and right over there, and then it's going to release, because when it's like an oval shape, and then once you press the left and the right, it expands these out, and then that just clips back in. So same thing, except you just don't have any room. So this time I'm going to remove our clip down here. Now this clip is offable. Once you get it to a certain point, sometimes what you can do is just take your screwdriver, a flathead, and then just very carefully twist it a little bit left and a little bit right, and then that'll loosen it up. And then you can just get it and just pull it off the rest of the way. Okay, so once you've removed that, there's a C-clip that's holding the rest of your inlet down. Now, if you look over here, you can sort of see the channel that it's gonna sit in, and it comes from the bottom. Now, with these, I'm just gonna pull it out and then I'll show you. You can literally just reach down. I don't even use any pick tools or anything. Okay, you don't need to, but I just pulled it all the way off. I'll show you how that works in just a second. Once that's off, this is gonna pop out just like that. So just to give you a sense of what was actually happening, so I'll hook it there and slide it back in. Okay, so the inlet is going to sit like this. And basically what I do is I reach down, and you can pretty easily grab this. If it's too small for you to grab, just grab a pick tool or something and then loop it in. And then typically what you can do is you can get it to come out just like that, where you can see everything is fully released, and then you pull it off. Sometimes when you're pulling, this will just come off. It's not a big deal. Now when you go to reinstall it, what you do is you actually clip it into place, so you can see that this piece here, here, and here will actually clip onto the turbo. Well, it's angled, so when you go to actually reinstall it, you just push it on, the clips will flex out, and then they'll snap into place. Okay, next we need to remove this little heat shield. To do so, it's literally just these 3 little snaps, and then pulls off just like that. Once you've done that, we need to remove the connection that goes to the wastegate. So take your screwdriver, pop that up, and then you'll be able to just push it in with your finger and then pull it off. And then while we're working on this line, you can pull that off over there. And then there's another connection over here. It's gonna be really hard for you to see because I can't even see it. Basically, it's gonna be the exact same thing. This one just we're gonna do without seeing. Okay, so again with this one, I just reached my pick tool around, I pulled down this, and then I pulled it straight off, and this one was just directly under here, just for reference if you can see where my finger is. That's where that other connection is. Okay, next we're gonna remove this line. I would recommend just twisting it ever so slightly to get it out of the way. Kind of hurts, so be careful. And then once you've done that, there's another connection over here. This one's positioned. These are my favorite. I don't know if I ever told you that. Okay, so that's gonna come off like that. And then there's one more C-clip that holds the bottom in. So like we did with a couple other, if you take a tool, you can just very carefully loosen this one up. This one's a little tight. There we go. So get that like that. And then this is gonna pull off, and I'm just gonna get this, I'm just gonna put it right here. And then what we're gonna do is take a T30, and we're gonna loosen these two top bolts here. And then there's one down here. Set that over there. Next, what I'm gonna do is remove these other connections. So we have this one here. And again, you don't have to fully remove your charge pipe. Not sure if I said that or not yet. We're just gonna loosen it and try to wiggle it over. Because with the G20, there's just a lot of stuff you have to disconnect. And then over here, there's one more connection. So again, loosen it with the driver, and then you can pull it off by hand. Okay, so now that everything is pretty loose, I'm gonna pop it off over here. Then let's go slide it off the turbo. I'm going to pull off this C-clip. So as you can see here, we have an FTP charge pipe. If you have a stock one, it's gonna come off pretty much exactly the same. So as we've done before, just reach around, pull off the C-clip, just like that. You can reach down here, pull it off the turbo, and then just kind of shimmy it over. And that should be enough out of the way to do what we need to do. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to raise the car up a little bit. There's a coolant line we need to disconnect, so I'm gonna get it just enough to get my bucket underneath, and then I'll show you how to disconnect the coolant line. Okay, perfect. So now that you've done that, reach in here, you're a champ with C-clamps now. So just lift it up. Okay, once you've done that, these are really tough to get off. You just want to wiggle it around, just like that. And then aim for your bucket. Whoop, I got my shoe wet. I missed a little. Mr. Clean has nothing on coolant. Okay, so now what you can do is take your clip, again like with the turbos, and you just clip it down so that those little pieces of metal are exposed. And when you slide it on, that's gonna snap on. You'll also notice these only go on one way. There's a little notch there and a little notch there, and that is because there's this little thing that sticks out on the top and also the bottom, so it only goes on one way. So keep that in mind as you're reinstalling this. And then once you hear that audible click, you're good. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the heat shield out of the way. You're going to need a 13 to start. There's a bolt right here. And even though it's a good sized bolt, it's not very tight at all. I'll take this out. There's another one right here. Okay. Then over here, there's a T30. So let's have to take this out. Okay. And this is just gonna come straight off like that. And what I'm gonna do now, I'm just gonna put these in place so I remember what goes where. And then over here, there's another 13 mil. And then if I was doing this installation off camera, I'd reach over and I'd get the other 13 mil and whatnot. But you can't see a thing of what I'm doing. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put the car up in the air so that you can get a good view of what's going on. All right, so then we just changed angles for you so you can see what we're doing. You're gonna reach up in the corner over here. And again, you can do this from the top. You don't have to do it from over here. And then just break that loose and remove this bolt. Then if you're up top, you can pull it up, or if you're at the bottom, just pull it down, but looks just like that. Okay, so again, all this can be done for the most part from the top, but if we film from the top, you never see what we're doing. There's a T30 here that needs to get removed for this line. And then there's also one over here. It's like a little secondary clip. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm going to just break these loose, and then I'm gonna take them out by hand. So it might be a little bit hard for you to see. So we tried to point it out ahead of time. So now that I have those broken loose, I'm gonna just spin these out with my driver. Okay, so here's one, and then there's two. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna just put this towel just in case anything leaks out, which it probably will. I'm just gonna carefully pull this out of the block. Oh. Ooh, it's cold. Okay, once you've done all of that, there is a T45. You might be able to get this from the top. Probably gonna be easier from the bottom though. So I've already loosened it just because I'm at a really weird angle right now. But at this time, you can go ahead and release this bolt. All right, so that is done. Once you get that middle bolt out, you're gonna remove the other two T45 bolts that hold the rest of the bracket in. This is the best angle to get the one in the front, and then just reaching up through here is the easiest way to get the one from the back. Okay, and you're gonna pull the bolt out. Looks just like this. So even though they're not very big, it's a really tight area and it feels like the bolt's like 4 feet long. All right, so you're not gonna be able to really see this one either, but I'm just gonna reach up, find my bracket here, and then you can release the one here in the front. And then once you get this front one out, you're gonna be able to pull it off with that little bracket. If you don't take this off, when you go to remove the turbo, it's gonna be in your way. So it's definitely something you have to remove. So when you have it installed, just so you know, the side with the welded nut is gonna face the front of the car. If you look at all the BMW stamping, it's all upside down. So it may look like it goes like this, but it actually goes like this. And this is pretty important because the turbo probably weighs 30 pounds or so. It's not light at all, especially when you're trying to maneuver it in weird positions. So this is very critical to take some of the weight off of those top bolts. So once you've done that, there's two other lines. We need to remove another oil line and then another coolant line. But we're gonna do all of that from the top since that's gonna be easiest for you to see. After that, we are going to start taking off the nuts. So when you do this, it's only the nuts at the top that you're going to be removing. That bottom plate just stays there and kind of rocks in and locks in place. You're not really gonna be able to see this once we go back up to the top, but they're pretty much all in a row. There's like 6 to 8 of them. So once we get to the top, I'll show you the first few and then you could just move over and you'll have a good sense. But just in case you do want to see, I'll point up here. This is what we're going to be removing. So this is what the nuts look like, and this is where that far one's gonna be. Again, you're not gonna be able to see a lot of these, but you're gonna be able to know exactly what's what once you're in there. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to remove this coolant line here. So again, pull up on the C-clip like so. And we're gonna pull this down. Okay, and it should be dry. And then just so you don't lose it, just take this and just clip it back in. And then this is typically held in with a T30. So if you can see where my finger is down here, you can sort of see that. There's a T30 that's gonna secure this in place. So at this time, you can remove that. Okay. And then you're gonna remove this other oil line over here. This is by your charge pipe. Okay, and I would recommend having some kind of microfiber towel because it is possible you're going to drip a little bit of oil. You want to try to minimize that as much as possible. All right, so now it's loose. There we go. As you can see, just a little bit of oil, but we were there to catch it. Okay, so at this point, there are 7 of these nuts across the top. So if you look over here, if you can see it, there's one here, 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 and so forth. So I'm gonna start with the ones that you can't see, and I'm going to work my way towards the middle and then we're going to support it. And then we're going to, once you get to that point, we'll rock the turbo and pull it out. So with that, let's get started with these back ones and work our way in. Okay, so that's what we're removing, and we only use these once. We're gonna replace them with brand new ones. Once you've removed the bolts, you're gonna take off this piece of metal, it goes there. And then when you're grabbing the turbo, make sure that you're not grabbing the wastegate because you're gonna completely destroy it if so. You wanna make sure that you're grabbing it, especially by this middle section. I wouldn't even really grab it too much by these end sections. So maybe grab carefully because it's plastic around the inlet, or down here where the downpipe is, or just right up here. But what you can do is just lift it up and rock it around just like that. And I'm just maneuvering my lines before I come up with it, making sure that I'm not gonna get stuck on my charge pipe or anything. Okay. And there you have it, the stock turbo from a G20 M340i. Now before we do anything else, we need to do something very important. I want to pull this gasket off. If you don't pull a gasket off and you double gasket it, you can have a big problem. So we're going to avoid that. Okay, there we go. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to see how much this turbo actually weighs. Let's do it like this. We're going to get oil everywhere. Look at that, I said 30 pounds. It's 30.72. Boom, look at that, right on. All right. Thanks, please. Sorry I made a mess. Okay, so here we have side by side the turbos. You can see this is the OEM turbo, and then this is what Pure has done to it. So as you can see, it is massive. Not only on this side, but if I turn my table around, you can see that this is the size that it comes with. And look at this. It is so much bigger. Look at that, it's so tiny. It's so huge. So this is where really all your power is coming from. These bigger wheels they're putting in these. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer over the wastegate actuator from this turbo to this one over here. So to do so, I'm just gonna take a little flathead. I'm gonna carefully maneuver this little clip off, put it over there. Okay, so now you can see that there are several of these T20s. I'm gonna remove these now. One more. There's just one in each corner. Okay, so once you've got this off, this is gonna come off like this. And then just take some kind of like channel locks or pliers. Just give it a really light squeeze. And you'll be able to navigate this piece and you won't have to touch your wastegate or anything. It'll all go in just one piece. Just like that. Okay. Then you just take it, go into the other side. Okay, make sure that your groove is all lined up here. Okay. And then for this, you're going to need a flathead screwdriver, which I have right here. Ready? Go. Let's pop that in place like that. Your heat shield's gonna go over here. And you can take all these and put them back in. Now before you have everything super tight, it's a good idea to just throw that over there. Okay, then you can torque these down. These get torqued to a whopping 3 Newton meters. So don't over tighten them because it's very easy to do. Okay, so then you get your little clip. Just make sure it doesn't go flying. Slide that on just like that. Make sure it's tight and not gonna go anywhere. Okay, so then what we're gonna do, we're gonna flip this over like this. And we're gonna transfer over our lines. So you're gonna need your T30 again. Remove this bolt here. So the way BMW did this was actually pretty cool. They have this line on top, but you just kind of wiggle these around to get them out. Kind of a pain in the butt. The biggest thing is just making sure that you're applying outward pressure in the direction that it needs to go. Okay, so that one's gonna go on top. We have this one we need to get off. And they did something kind of neat with the next one. Okay, so your oil line. Now, I'm gonna clear out some of this oil so you can actually see what I'm doing. With this next one, if you look down here, you see how there's this piece of metal and it slides under this. So right now it's locked in, but if we twist it, then you can pull it out. So BMW figured out a little way to, not that it's that crazy difficult, but they figured out a way to secure it without using another bolt. All right, so once you have this out, you're pretty much ready to transfer it over. Like I was saying earlier, we got all new O-rings, so we're gonna head over to that table. I'm just gonna swap them out off camera, and then we're gonna come back and show you how to reinstall everything. Okay, so now that we have a new O-ring on here, we're gonna take it. I'm just gonna slide in like this. And then remember, it's just gonna twist and lock into place, just like that. Now when you're installing this, if it's not going in, make sure that you rotate this around because BMW designed this so if it's not positioned correctly, this won't be fully seated. So you wanna make sure that it sits nice and flat like that. All right, one more. Looks good, and we'll get our bolt and we'll put this back in. We'll torque it down to 8 Newton meters. Okay, we are good to go. Now the last part that you didn't see us install, but we're just gonna throw it on really quick after this, is this little inlet portion. Now this comes pre-installed on the turbo, so it's not something you really have to worry about. And unless you want to check out your turbo, you never really have to remove this piece either. Now something to note that's different in addition to the Pure one just being completely massive compared to the OEM, is you will notice that this one has this little connection and the Pure one does not. This is a little heating element for your PCV valve. It doesn't really do a tremendous amount according to Pure, so well, they just delete it. So you will have one connection that you just need to tie up that will not be used. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna reinstall this little inlet and then we're gonna install the turbo. The next part of the process is we are going to put a new seal in our downpipe. You're already this far, so might as well make sure that the seal is good. So if you take a pick tool, you can take the old one out, it kind of disintegrates, so be careful and don't put it anywhere near your eye. It's always a good idea to get a new one. So then when you put this in, you just line it up and then start to press it in place. And then what'll happen is it's this weird, like soft material. You can see it's like deteriorating in my hand. And that's what creates a good seal. So you just get it as far in as you can and then it really crushes it and seals it. So because of that, this one's already flattened. So you might not get the best seal, you might get some exhaust leaks. So for the 20 bucks or whatever these cost, it's definitely worth doing. Okay, so now that we have our old seal off, we're gonna put our new gasket and it's going to go right in here. But one thing I do want to point out, just a reminder, these studs right here, this is what you're going to be threading onto. You want to make sure that there's 2 little pins, they're very important. So there's one over here and then there's one way over here. I'm gonna try to do this by feel here. All right, so this one's really hard for me to get my arm down with the camera here, but it's basically right here, if you can see that, right between the last 2 studs. Now the purpose of those is to make sure that this piece that moves around is locked in place, and then the same on the other side. Okay, so we're gonna take our new gasket. Just gonna pop it on here. Make sure that you put the little centering rod through. Good, and then it should stay on there pretty easily. I'm just going by feel just to make sure everything is in. You wanna make sure that this bottom part of the gasket is tucked into this piece of metal right there. All right, it's turbo time. So let's take this turbo. And we're gonna install it. So the way that you install these, you slide the bottom part on first. There's a little ledge it's going to hold onto. And again, when you're holding the turbo, don't hold it by the ends here. You want to hold it pretty much by the manifold. You also want to be very careful that you don't put any pressure on the wastegate. So with that, let's lower it down. Okay, so the best way to do this is exactly how we took it out. Just go in like this. Piece of cake. Just make sure that there's no lines or anything in the way that could get pinched. And again, just be really careful of your wastegate. Okay. That all looks good. Okay, so once you have the turbo on, you want to make sure that the turbo is sitting flat. If not, it's very possible that one of these pins is holding it up. So you want to be very careful of that. Make sure you test on this side and also on this side, and we are good. So now I can take this piece of metal here. We'll call it a retaining clip for lack of knowing what it's actually called. And then we're going to take a new set of nuts. These are one-time use, so only use them once. And I'm just going to put the center one on. Very light, I'm not going to actually torque it, just so the turbo doesn't fall off. Now, because you kind of slide it into that groove, it shouldn't fall off even if you don't have this, but this is just going to give it some extra security. All right, so now that we have our center nut on, what we need to do now is first put all of the other nuts on, but then we have to start the torque sequence. So basically what you're going to do, there's 7 different nuts that you have to install. The torque sequence is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. So what we're going to do, we're going to do it to 10 Newton meters. We're going to do it twice. And then we're going to do it at 16 Newton meters, and we're going to do it 2 or 3 times just to double check that everything is joined correctly. Now, this is so much easier than N55 or S55, because before it was top to bottom to top to bottom, and you had to go all over. Sometimes it was under the car, sometimes above. This is so easy. It's all right on top. So let's keep this over here for reference. And at this time, I'm gonna put these nuts on and I'm gonna torque them down to 10 Newton meters. All right, so right now all of the nuts are on and they are torqued to 10 Newton meters, but just to be safe, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna retorque them all to 10 Newton meters one more time. Then once you've done that, we're going to torque everything to its final torque, which is 16 Newton meters. At this point of the process, we can now install our heat shield with these 13 millimeter bolts, and then these are going to get torqued down to 19 Newton meters. Now, before you actually torque everything down, make sure you get your T30 and just hand thread it in down below here, just to make sure everything's gonna line up. Okay, now we'll torque all the top ones to 19 Newton meter, and then we'll go back and we'll do that T30 to 8 Newton meter. Okay, so at this point, heat shield's on. My hand was by this coolant line, so I'm just going to pop this on. Remember, if you have the little C-clip already engaged, all you need to do, you're not really gonna be able to see it, just lift up until you hear that audible click, and that is fully installed. And we can start to pull our old wiring and start to put things back into place. And now you can do things like clip your wastegate back in. We're just gonna let that hang for 1 second. Okay, then on the bottom of that hose we just clipped in, there's another little supporting bracket right here. So you want to start to take a T30, be very careful not to drop it in the turbo. You want to just start to thread this in here. And then once you have that all set, that gets torqued down to 8 Newton meters. Then down here you can take your line, just carefully press it in. And then once again, this is 8 Newton meters. Okay. So at this point, now that we have all of that done, we're going to put the car up in the air. We're going to finish putting these little T30s in to secure the other lines, and then we're going to put this lower support bracket that actually supports the turbo. So at this time, let's put the car up. All right, so this might get difficult to see when I put my arm up here, but we're gonna put this line back in. So you're gonna take this, and you're just gonna wiggle it into place. Then you can hand thread your T30 bolt in here. You wanna make sure that it threads with ease. You don't wanna cross thread any of these, okay? And then there's another one up here on this little bracket. So I'll reach up and do that one next. And then you can go back and torque those to 8 Newton meters. All right, it's kind of a weird angle, but it's the only way I could show you. But you're gonna take your oil line and you're gonna wiggle this up here. Okay, like that. And then the bottom, you're probably not gonna be able to see it because I can't even see it. You're gonna wiggle that into place. Make sure that where you're going to put the bolt in, that it's flush, so it's flush down here and it's flush up here. And then we can put our T30 bolts in and torque these down to 8 Newton meters as well. All right, there's the bottom one. Now when you're torquing these, you can get like a click at a time, so just hang in there. Perfect. So now we need to install the turbo support bracket. So the one with the side with the nut is gonna face the front of the car. And as you can see, it's a little bit tough for you to see exactly what's gonna happen. We're gonna try to get you the best angle we can. Again, these are all T45s. They're gonna get torqued down to 19 Newton meters. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to put these two bottom ones on, and then I'm going to get the one that goes through that little loop in the turbo last. And then once everything is threaded in, then I'm gonna go back and torque everything down. So let's see if we can fish this through here. So now that the bolt is through that actually holds the bracket on, now normally I would do it the opposite way, but just for camera angle sake, I had to do a little switcheroo there since I can't really see what I'm doing. I'm just doing it by feel. So we're gonna just thread these in. Again, make sure everything threads in with ease. You don't wanna strip anything. Okay, so that one went in really nice. Then I'm gonna see if I can reach up this way and get this in. All right, I think I got it. My hand's stuck, but I got it. All right, once you've done that, you're gonna tighten these T45s down to 19 Newton meters. And this is another one where you get like one click of your ratchet at a time, really tight. Okay, I'm on the one that's closest to me. There you go. All right, so now what we're gonna do, we're gonna feed the downpipe up. We're not gonna fully tighten it. We're gonna tighten it from up top first, but we're gonna just watch your O2 sensors. We're going to carefully feed it through here. Just get it in place. And then we're going to hook this bracket onto the location up there. Then we're gonna tighten the V-band from up top. The cool thing about how they designed the B58 is that little bracket will hold it in place. So just clip it in place. And I'm going to lightly thread these on. And you're not gonna be able to see this, but just thread those two nuts on that we removed earlier. Make sure that your O2 sensor wires are in a place where you can get them from up top. And then we'll go up top and we'll tighten that downpipe. Okay, so now that that is in place, what we're gonna do, we're gonna put the car back down. We're going to tighten the V-band clamp from the top, put the charge pipe back on, and assemble all of the top of the car. And then we're gonna come back down. We'll put the underbody protection on. We'll tighten up these two nuts on the downpipe that hold that in place. And then we'll put the exhaust back on, and we're getting really close to being done. Okay, so then up top, you're gonna take your V-band clamp, make sure that the nut is nice and loose. And you want to just twist that around. Make sure that it's all the way around, even in the back. Okay. And then once you have it on, it should slide around pretty easily. What I like to do
is I like to take the bolt that we're going to be tightening, and I like to put it down here. And the reason for that is you don't want your wastegate arm to hit the bolt or anything like that. So if you put it down there, it should be out of your way. So then take your 13 mil and you want to tighten up your V-band. And we're going to take our O2 sensor wires, put them up in the clips. You can route them over here. So the blue one goes in the back. This one goes here. Push it in, lock it in. Push it in, lock it in.
Now what we can do is we can start to put the charge pipe back in. When you're doing this, I just want to show you an example. If you're using something like an FTP charge pipe, there is a right and a wrong way to do this. So if you put the C-clamp on the wrong way, it's going to look like this, which is no bueno. Because what happens is this part is hanging over the top and it's not giving you enough metal to grab. So, whoop. If you are using this, what you want to do instead is you want to make sure that this piece of metal is on this side, because as you can see, there's a little lip right there. So that's going to elevate it and it's going to make it so it's not grabbing as good. So I know some other companies are very similar to where the clips only go on one way, but at this time, you can put your C-clip in, and then again, once we put the turbo on, it's just gonna snap right into place. And for reference, we happen to have a turbo, so I'll show you. So you're gonna get it, it's gonna go, it's gonna clip on, just like that. Okay, so then take your charge pipe, slide it on, press it on until you hear that clip, wiggle it around, make sure it's good, and the bottom's done. Then you can take your charge pipe and just carefully put that back in there. And you can take these sensors, there's one right there, and here's another one right there. Make sure that you're pushing that little clip in after you install it, and then we can put the T30s back in. And then just snug these up. Okay, then we're gonna get our PCV, snap that in there. Then you're gonna plug this in right here. Make sure you hear the audible clip to know that it's fully in, okay? Then with this one, make sure that your C-clamp is in. And again, make sure that your little C-clamp is in the right orientation. And then this is going to slide. Okay, there we go. And that is good to go. Okay, and then we're gonna get this and clip it here. Now, you will notice, as we mentioned before, the new Pure Turbo does not need this connection. So what you can do is you can just take a zip tie and just tie it up and out of the way. So I'm just gonna tie it here. Okay, so now it's time for your inlet. When you're doing this, make sure that you have this connection right here at the bottom. When I did it, I accidentally plugged this in over this, so I just had to quick switch that. But make sure that this is at the bottom, otherwise it's going to be very difficult to actually plug in. And again, make sure that your C-clip is pressed in all the way, and make sure it's in the correct place. Now on these, it's super easy to figure out what is what. So we're gonna take this, slide it on the turbo. Okay, and then once you're in, it's gonna clip into place. All right, you might not have been able to hear that, but that is clipped in. And then this is kind of tight. It's my least favorite connection on the whole car. Okay, there we go. Boom. Okay, before we put the rest of the intake back in, we're gonna feed this little heat shield blanket thing over here. Keeps you cool in the summer and warm in the winter. Okay, make sure it's fully seated to protect the plastic, because this is gonna put off an immense amount of heat. So now you could take your intake, whichever intake you may have, and you can reinstall it.
Okay, once your intake is fully installed, take your mass airflow sensor, plug that in, lock it in place. So as I said before, we like to just change the oil and filter since you're already doing all of this. So I'm just gonna remove the cap off of this. We do have a full oil change video if you're not sure how and what to do. Okay, so we'll take our old filter out. We'll take our old O-ring off. If you buy the genuine kit from BMW, it always comes with a new one, which you want to swap on and make sure you get it in this groove, and then just take some of this old oil and just lubricate that. Then on your actual filter, there's two sides. This side that has the O-ring on the inside is going to go in there. So you just kind of put it in and then twist it and it locks. And then this side is going to get threaded down. And the torque on this is 25 Newton meters. All right, so once you've done all that, my drain plug is tightened. It's torqued down, it has the crush washer. We're going to add 6.5 quarts of oil. Okay, we'll put our cap back. We'll put it right side up. Okay, and then the last thing we have to do up here is refill the coolant. So as you'll notice, this car does have 2 reservoirs. This one should stay full. You shouldn't have it drained out or anything like that. So we're just gonna tighten that back up. And then this one should be completely empty, which is completely empty. So what we need to do is we need to fill this with a 50-50 blend of BMW coolant and distilled water. Once we do that, we're going to use a vacuum bleeder in today's video. It's something you can get on Amazon, very cheap, and it's definitely the most efficient way to do it. With the BMW OEM bleed process, you can do it that way, but it takes about 12 minutes every time you want to bleed it. And typically it takes more than one try, where if you use a vacuum bleeder, you can bleed the entire system in about 5 minutes because it'll suck all of the air out, create a vacuum, and then you fill it with fluid. It's very fast, very efficient. It's what BMW uses. If you use the built-in system, like I said, it works fine. I've done it a ton of times on a ton of different cars, but you might have to do it 3 times or so. And after every time you do it, it's another 12 minutes. And then sometimes you have to take the battery off for 5 minutes, reconnect. So what you could do in 5 minutes for like a $50 bleeder, it's gonna take you 45 minutes or so potentially. So just something to be aware of. Okay, then once you have that fully bled, we're going to secure that and then we'll put the engine cover back on. For the engine cover, just aim for that right there, clip it in, and this top section is done. So we can take off our fender guards and then finish up tightening the downpipe, putting the exhaust on, and then this is done. Then we're just gonna tighten these 2 bolts that secure the downpipe, and after that, we're gonna just hang the exhaust. Again, it's just hanging it on here, a couple exhaust hanging points, and then we're done. Now, before I start it, one thing I want you to know if you're doing this at home, it is extremely common to see a little smoke upon startup. It's just typically the coating on the turbo. Sometimes there's a hint of coolant or a hint of oil on the turbo. So if you start to see just a little bit of smoke, it's no concern at all. If there's a lot of smoke, that's a problem. Shut the car off. So let's start it up. This car is gonna be insane. All I have to do is just tap the pedal and it's a beast. So I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a little smoke coming from this general area. That's what I was saying before. It's perfectly normal. I wanted to tell you before we started. And that's how you install a pure 800 turbo on a G20 M340i. So as you saw, as far as turbo installs go, it is not bad at all. It's only gonna take you a couple hours with the right tools and equipment. Again, most of it is from the top, which is super easy. There's a little back and forth you have to do, but compared to like an S55 or an N55 or N54,
by far the easiest one to do. So once again, my name is Brian. Thanks for watching Kies Motorsports. If you are interested in any of the parts or tools we use in today's video, be sure to see the links in the description. If you haven't done so already, give us a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and check us out at kiesmotorsports.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.